and welcome to the third sector. I'm your host, Tamara Brinkman. In our society, there are three sectors: the public, the private, and the nonprofit. And it's that third sector that we're here to talk about today. Joining me on today's show, we will have Karen Shank-Chapman from the Wayne County Historical Museum. She's going to join us up first. And then later in the show, we will have Nunn from Wernle Youth and Family Treatment Center joining us. But first, we've got Karen with us. So Karen, hi, and welcome to Third Sector.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to hear all good things or all things about the Wayne County Historical Museum. Why don't we just get started with, give us some of the history. How did it start and get to where it is today?
Sure. It's actually one of my favorite things to tell people about because it's a really unique story, especially unique to a place like Wayne County, like we are. But we started off actually as a Quaker meeting house. So when you first walk in our museum building, that's what you're walking into. And that was built in the 1850s by the Hicksite Quakers here in Richmond. Well, then about 1929, there was a lady that lived here named Julia Meek Garr, and she loved traveling the world, and she brought back so many artifacts that soon her apartment quarters were being filled up with them. So she decided she needed a place for them. And this building actually came available. So it was gifted to her by the Hicksite Quakers, the Friends there. And she purchased the land around and began the Wayne County Historical Museum, built around her collections of world travels. And part of her vision was to share the world with the children of Wayne County. Maybe they weren't able to travel to Egypt or what have you, but she was able to bring it home to them. She was also very adamant about all types of history, including our Wayne County history. So she began our very first collection of Wayne County historical artifacts. And she was just a really neat lady. She did a lot of traveling, but she also worked with a lot of museums, such as the Smithsonian, and she was even the director of the Indiana Historical Society for a time.
Oh, wow. That's quite a pedigree.
Yes, especially when ladies weren't doing those types of things.
Exactly.
So we really love Julia's story here.
Yes, quite the groundbreaker, and lucky for us she was. So tell us a little bit about the mission or the vision of the museum.
Really, we exist to, collect and preserve, to interpret, to educate our public about our amazing and rich history here in Wayne County. But more importantly, what we strive to do here is give a platform for everyone to find a reflection of themselves within our history. We really want anyone who walks through our door, no matter where they come from, to find that connection to our history. And we really believe that they can. From Egyptian mummies to the many cars that were manufactured here in Richmond to the pioneer history, our Native people, our people of color. There's so many different wonderful stories to be told, and we want to help people make those connections.
Well, we're excited that you're here to share all that with us and for people to learn about it. So what would you say is maybe some goals for the museum, or how do museums make goals for the next couple of years? Is it acquiring certain artifacts, or is it expansions of any kind? What would be the goals for the museum?
So those are great questions. So we will be coming up on our centennial here in 2030. So leading up to that, we have a signature exhibit and event every year. So we try to highlight an area of history of interest in Wayne County that we can connect wider audiences to. Right now, we're doing the Jeanette recording story. So next year we'll be doing our African-American history. So on and so forth till we get to year 2030. At that point, we do hope to perhaps expand our museum some so that we can expand the amount of exhibits that we're able to offer. A lot of people don't realize that a museum only is able to exhibit 5 to 10% of their artifacts at any given time. And I will tell you, we've got about 11 buildings full of storage. So while we might not, we're always acquiring more artifacts from our wonderful public. Really, we are also kind of looking at those things that maybe we don't really need so much anymore too. So we would really love to expand so we can get more of those things out on exhibit.
So I have a question for you, because that was when you said how much you have in storage and also the percentage of what you hold actually being viewable at any given time at the museum. Do you ever, you're like, well, we've had these things for a long time and they're great, but we're happy to trade them with some other museum for something else? Or does that happen, or not so much because you're a historical museum for a local community? How does that work?
Well, that's a great question. And that's what really makes us unique, because not only do we have collections just from Wayne County, but from the world at large. And a lot of our folks from Wayne County, they were world travelers at various times in history. So we've got a lot of cool stuff here. So yes, absolutely. If it ever comes down to something that maybe we have multiples of, we'll always check with other museums and historic sites to see if perhaps they can interpret it better than we can.
Right.
But for the most part, we're still trying to learn everything we have. So.
Wow. Well, I would hate to have to do inventory for all of what you have. That's for sure.
We always find something new, for sure.
Well, that's kind of fun. So tell us what's the impact that the museum has on our community?
I really think that this is a great place that people can come as families, as individuals. We really can attract people, those who are just maybe driving down 40, and then that word of mouth gets out, and then we can build that pride of place. I really think the museum is a great place to do that, because there are so many neat things from our history and our present day that we can get really excited about and tell others about and feel proud about.
Yeah, yeah. So on the other hand, what would happen to our community if we didn't have the Wayne County Historical Museum, if it ceased to exist here?
Well, that's a hard one for me, because I don't like to think about that. However,
right.
I do feel that a lot of our cultural history, a lot of those stories would be lost. And it's really our goal here to preserve those things. Everybody in our community has a story to share. And we want to be an open platform for that. And for that to go away, I think would be a very sad day.
Yeah. So how do you preserve?
That's a great question.
Whether that's, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we physically preserve artifacts, of course. I have a collections manager that works here, and that's my background in museum work as well. However, it takes a village. So we have lots of volunteers that help us, and our board members help a lot. We have a committee that's just dedicated to the museum collections. But in addition, we try to, like our archives, we try to digitize things. We're working to hopefully have an online platform where people can eventually see things virtually and things. We had a lot of great ideas when we were closed down for the pandemic that revolved around those types of things, like other ways to get people into the museum that might not be physical. But again, it's all of us coming together to preserve these stories, recording oral histories. Anybody that lives here probably has a story we'd be very interested in hearing about.
Right. So you mentioned that you have a lot of volunteers, or you have volunteers. If someone's watching this segment today and they're like, wow, I'd really like to get more involved, or I wonder if I could be a volunteer, is that possible? How would they go about doing that?
Absolutely. Just give us a call or come on in. We do have a little bit of information on the website, but I always say give us a call, because we love to talk to people, especially when it comes to volunteering at the museum. We have all kinds of opportunities, from collections to exhibits, developing exhibits, to beautifying our buildings and grounds, to working with programs and events. We have all kinds of opportunities for people.
Well, while you were sharing that, we also were able to put up a graphic that you provided us that kind of bulleted some of those areas. So maybe if people have interest, there's some opportunities. And then we also put the phone number up for the museum. So that's another way that they can contact make a connection with the museum if that's something they're interested in. And then we've also got the website up as well. So lots of different ways through the phone, through the website, to connect with you guys if volunteering is something that our viewers watching would be interested in doing. You mentioned you had one staff person who handles the curates and so forth for you. Do you have other staff, or how's your staff look like? What's the organization look like?
Yeah, so for museum our size, we have about 6 of us here. 2 of us are full-time and everybody else is part-time right now. But as we grow, we hope that will change because it takes a village. It really does. But we have a manager of education, a facilities manager, a guest services coordinator, and a bookkeeper, aside from myself and our collections manager.
Okay, well, that's a nice size staff, little group of y'all working together there. How are you funded? What keeps the lights on and the doors open?
Well, luckily our founder, Julia, we do through the county get a little bit to help us offset field trip costs, because all Wayne County students that come here on a field trip are free. Okay. And we want to continue that forever if we can. But grants, really, we get a lot of grants. We have donors, and we were left an endowment. So through all of those various things and fundraising efforts, that's how we do it.
Right.
So,
well, lucky for you guys. That's great. Lots of different revenue streams to keep things going.
Absolutely.
Tell us what brings you the most joy about what it is that you do there at the museum.
Well, I'll tell you, I grew up coming to this museum when I was, from the time I was a little girl. And when I went off to college, I wanted to find a way that I could still find that same wonder that I found here at the museum as a child. And I ended up going into museum studies of all things. And through some other jobs and pathways, I landed back here, and it came full circle. So I just think that the overall experience of getting to come to a place that I love so much and discovering new things every day and sharing those with our community, that's what just revs me up every single day.
Well, they say if you really love what you do, then it's not really going to work, is it?
It's really not. I come here to play. This is my happy place.
We should all be so lucky to have our day job be our happy place, and to get that much joy out of everything. So, well, we're going to leave it there for today. I want to thank you very much, Karen Shank-Chapman, Executive Director for the Wayne County Historical Museum, for joining me today and sharing with the community all the great opportunities that are right here in our local backyard to learn about your history and see some great artifacts from around the world. So sometimes us adults don't get to travel to Egypt either. So it's great that she brought all that to share with all ages and all generations. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
When we come back, joining me next will be Cliff Nunn from Wernle Youth and Family Treatment Center. Stay with us. Welcome back. Joining me now is Cliff Nunn, Director of Development for Wernle Youth and Family Treatment Center. Cliff, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're happy that you took a little time to talk to our viewers here for the Third Sector show. Let's just tell us the history of Wernle. How did it get started to where it is today?
Oh, sure. Keeping it brief.
Yes, you guys have been here for a long time. That I know.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, 143 years ago, we started out as an orphanage that was founded by some Lutheran churches here in the area. It was probably after the end of the First World War that we began to focus more on social services and social treatment. And then that took another shift after the Second World War, to where we truly began to focus on at-risk youth. Orphanages were kind of passing to the side, and there was a need for kids who were being placed in the system without parents, who had suffered trauma. and abuse and various other hardships. And that was kind of where Wernle turned its attention and became a social services agency. We went from serving what was really considered the local community at that point in time to include all of the state of Indiana and a large section of Ohio as well. So that's currently what we do. Our kids come to us from traumatic backgrounds, at-risk populations, and we serve Indiana and portions of Ohio primarily at this point.
Okay. So tell us, do you have a mission statement or a vision for the organization that you guide by?
We do. Our mission statement is really to be child-centered, to be family-focused, and to do so from a perspective of love and compassion. Our kids, sadly, because of their backgrounds, basic concepts of generosity and love and forgiveness and compassion are sadly foreign to them in many cases. So that is really the thrust behind our mission, and to bring healing and to bring an opportunity to recover to where they can have a good opportunity for a healthier chance at life for the future.
So what's involved in helping them through that? What is to the degree you can talk about it, what does treatment generally look like? Obviously, different people have different cases, have different issues that are going to play into how I'm sure you support them. But generally, what are the ways in which you try to accomplish these things, the healing?
Sure. Our kids, most of them have been in the system for quite a while at this point in time. That's the population that we focus on. So most of our kids have not been recently removed or placed in the system, but they've been in the system. So they will come to us with extensive backgrounds that we have to become very familiar with. And then we have social service workers, case managers, psychiatrists, psychologists, medical staff that will put together an individual treatment plan for the residents. We are an open residential facility, meaning the kids are placed here by the counties if it's considered to be a good fit. So we're not a detention center, we're not a closed center, but we're an open residential treatment. So they're placed with us, they go on a 30-day to 45-day period where we kind of get to know them, they get to know us, and it's during that time that their individual treatment plan is written. And then we bring all of those social services, medical services, psychiatric services to bear to try to help them understand their trauma as best as we can, move them through the steps to begin a recovery process. And then for the short time that we have them, and most people don't realize, we will typically only have a child for 9 to 12 months maximum to make as large of an impact on that healing and recovery as we can, so that they can move into a less restrictive environment. And that's our goal, is to move them from a residential treatment program that is quite restrictive, even though we are an open care facility, into an opportunity to go to a less restrictive program where they can experience more freedoms, more of a sense of normalcy, if you will, in their life as they continue the journey towards healing and recovery.
So did you mention correctly that the county places them? So is that through courts? I mean, are there situations where a family may just individually or privately seek out treatment with you, or are you simply just a treatment center where people are placed versus choosing to bring a child to your facility? Does that make sense, I guess?
No, it does. It does. And it's a very good question. We do not work with what's considered private placement.
Private placement, okay.
Yeah, all of our youth are placed with us through the counties.
Okay.
As I said, being as they have been in the system for a while, they have a long list of incidents and traumas and difficulties that they are recovering from. So that's where our licensure is focused at. There are other facilities that will work with kids that have less acuity. And therefore parents are able to directly work with those institutions and place them, but Wernle takes the higher acuity kids.
Got it.
For many of our kids, If it isn't for their placement at Wernle, they would be going into a detention center.
Okay.
So we're really kind of that last stopgap measure to try to interrupt the journey that they're on,
Right.
and get them moving in a healthier trajectory as opposed to a detention facility.
Right. Okay. What's the general, is there an age range that you guys tend to see?
There is. Our license will allow us to take kids as young as elementary age. But because of the higher level of acuity that we deal with, we find that our population is usually that junior high to high school level. Again, the kids who have experienced the worst of what sometimes humanity can sadly do to humanity. And then the choices they have made for themselves once they've been in the system, sometimes out of survival, sometimes out of necessity, unfortunately, have also further complicated their journey of recovery. So we deal with those junior high school kids primarily, both genders. We serve boys and girls in separate units. And the younger ones will tend to go into, again, a different facility that's catered more towards less acuity, less trauma.
Got it. Got it. How would you have like an estimation of how many kids you guys see or serve in a year?
I'm sure that others on this program have talked about in the past the challenges of staffing. So our challenge right now in keeping our census up is having qualified individuals to work here in our program. We, pre-COVID, pre the loss of the employment force at so many different levels, we would probably see about 165, 175 kids pass through our program. In the current environment, we're probably closer to 85 to 100 in an annual basis that'll move through our programs. Now, we also offer what's called home-based services, where we work with families that have not yet had youth removed, but there is trauma and difficulty within the family. So we have home-based services. That program will work with, I think last year, around 150 to 160 families. So we try to intervene on both ends of the spectrum, prior to the kids being removed and then after the kids have been removed as well.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned the challenges of staff or having staff. Give us an overview of the staff. So maybe how it is today and it stretches to when you have all the positions filled.
Yeah. We're probably at about 50% of what our typical staffing would be for what we consider our direct care staff, the individuals that are working directly with the kids. When we are fully staffed, we're north of 170 staff. So we're really we're a larger employer here in the Richmond area. But we're running about 50% of that presently.
Okay. So you mentioned that a lot of these kids are placed with you in most instances through court systems. You're kind of that last stop. How is Wernle funded? How are you able to provide the services that you do?
Sure. When the county places a child with us, they pay a monthly fee for that child to be here. And that basically covers room, board, and medical. So it's covering the necessities of care for the child, everything that we need to keep them moving in a positive trajectory. The challenge for us is we feel it's really important that these kids have a well-rounded program to move them towards healing and recovery. So they need experiences that kids would have even if they were not in treatment. So we have a fundraising department. We do an annual gala in the fall that is a significant fundraiser for us that provides funding to take care of all those extracurricular activities. So if we have a child that's a senior perhaps in school and they want a yearbook, counties aren't going to pay for that sort of thing. We pay for that. If they're involved in sports, band, if we take them to an outing, we raise funds to take care of all of that. Even their clothing is stuff that we raise funds for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all important things and also fascinating and interesting to me. You've been in the community a long time, started with the orphanage transition to what, to where you are today, what would happen if Wernle was not in our community? If you ceased to exist, what would that impact be?
There is a long waiting list, unfortunately, and this is across the country, of kids who are needing services. There are insufficient facilities like ours. So I can say that we serve, 85 to 100 kids annually in our present state, but there is twice that many kids waiting for placement. Wow. So if Wernle disappeared, sadly, it would just mean that many more kids not receiving the services that they're so desperately in need of, which minimizes anyone's opportunity to interrupt that journey and interrupt that trajectory, which then means more kids are incarcerated, more kids are headed towards the detention centers. So it would be a very sad situation if Wernle and other facilities like ours did not exist to try to interrupt that journey.
Yeah. So little change in the last, we have about a minute-ish or so left. You work with a tough situation, kids from tough backgrounds, but there's still hopefully joy within them. Yeah. What brings you the most joy about what you do with Wernle?
I have been working with at-risk kids for over 30 years. I've been with Wernle for the last 6 years. There is nothing more joyful than seeing the smile on a child's face, especially a child that arrives here and due to their trauma, they're not even able to make eye contact. They're not able to shake a hand. They can't make that compassionate connection. To see them 3, 4, 6 months down the road, say, "Hey, Cliff, may I have a hug? Hey, Cliff, catch the ball." Those sorts of interactions that show that glimmer of hope returning back to their eyes. That makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. Priceless. Sounds like.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, we're going to leave it there. Cliff, I can't thank you enough for joining us. As we wrap up this episode of The Third Sector, I would like to take a moment to thank both of my guests, Karen Shank-Chapman from the Wayne County Historical Museum, and as we just heard from Cliff Nunn, Director of Development for Wernle Youth and Family Treatment Center. We appreciate them taking the time to share with me and with you, our viewers, what they do in our community, and we thank them for that. Stay well, and we'll see you next time on The Third Sector.